It's really tough when you're building out systems to manage all this stuff, and there is no one size fits all. I'm out here trying to compete to make a living and make a buck, right? And this guy's being at zero margins. Let's talk more about that and helping the largest. So you were analyzing how they were choosing subcontractors. How does that benefit me, the person that's listening to this? What can I learn from that? Your experiences
Well,
there.
it probably wouldn't apply to a lot of the people who are listening to this, frankly, just because like when you get a CPSR, you're probably doing about 25 million already.
Okay.
But at a certain level, you will become ineligible for bids on some of these $50 million contracts without a CPSR.
Okay.
So the firm that I work for called ProcureLinks, and my buddy Mark runs that. Um, we basically would go in and help companies get up to speed, write a procurement manual, but also tailor that procurement manual that made sense for that company and their culture. Right. So as an example, I think at the time the micro purchase threshold was $3,000. So under that $3,000 threshold per the FAR, I didn't have to do a lot of the documentation that I would for something over that threshold. Right. I can do a
Mhm.
more streamlined process. And so we decided, we looked at their procurement and their spend, their um, average dollar amount of their procurement was like 30K. So we decided to change their procurement manual to 25,000. So that excluded anything under 25,000 from going through the really robust process we use, the streamlined process. Right. That makes sense.
Yep, that makes sense to me.
So yeah, I mean, again, I've just seen a lot of these companies that, when you get to billions and billions of dollars, it's amazing how much inefficiency you can see.
Yeah, I would imagine it has to be because I can tell you, it's really tough when you're building out systems to manage all this stuff, and there is no one size fits all. And then
Absolutely.
when you look at right when we get into the weeds of it all, and you like you said, you discuss the different types of contracts, the different types of regulations, and then you've got to again you talked about writing the procurement manuals, but then what about like the person I interviewed yesterday, who's the she manages, right, the small business element, right, which is being compliant with all the small business regulations, right? So you've got
Mhm.
the contract regulations, you got the small business regulations that you've got to stay compliant on both fronts. Um, there's a lot of things in terms of delivery and execution that make it really challenging.
Well, the thing I would say is early on in my career, I had a really good mentor and I was struggling. The VP was asking me about, specific language in the FAR, right? The Federal Acquisition Regulations.
Sure.
And as you start learning, you'll realize that every agency has their own version of regulations. Like you kind of just mentioned it, right? The SBA has some, the
Right.
DoD has some, GSA has them, et cetera. So I remember like the guy was like, show me in the FAR where it says this. And I was struggling, and my boss was like, okay, well, John, do you want the German or the French interpretation? I was like, what do you mean, sir? He's like, well, the Germans are a little bit more rule followers and play by the book, right? So if it says you can do something, then you can do it. The French were kind of a little bit more disorderly sometimes, right? And so they would say, well, it doesn't prohibit it, so I can
Mm,
do it.
right.
So again, I think that really defines a company culture as well. Like, and I've also learned that compliance is super subjective, man. Like tell me I'm here's how I set up my manual. I'm compliant enough with it. Show me where I'm not. Right. And you may get dinged on some things, but if you have a good story to tell and you're following your process, you should be good to go. Right. You may get dinged. Someone may not like it, but it's like, this is why I did it. Here's my rationale. And I think that's important for small businesses too, because again, you got to be aware of the requirements, of course, right? But you also have to know where those areas of gray are, and then what kind of company are you? Like, are you risk takers? Are you risk adverse? Like, how does this apply to the jobs that you're doing? Right. So every industry's got, certain pain points and certain high risk items. And, a business owner would know that. So my job is to understand where their pain points are, where their risk tolerance is. Because I'm seeing companies that are bidding at zero margins, right? And it's like, really?
Mm,
Like, oh, and they're going to make it up because they're going to grow so fast, and then their rates are going to shrink, and then the margin will be there. And that works for some companies, but there's a lot of risk in there,
huge
right?
risk.
A 5-year contract, if I go from like 1 million to 10 million in revenue, my ratio, you know, those are all ratios, right?
Wow.
Yeah. I
It's
mean,
crazy that, I mean, to think some, and that it's interesting that you said that, because for me, that's really disheartening because, um, I'm out here trying to compete to make a living and make a buck, right? And this guy's being at zero margins.
well, yeah, I mean, you can't,
How do you
that's what
compete
I
with
have,
that?
that's what I have to factor in my analysis sometimes, right? And again, I don't like doing that, but I know that there's some operators that do that. None of my clients do because, but again, I have to shadow what another competitor might do, and
So
then it's
so
also,
let's talk about that for a couple minutes here. Uh, and surprisingly, when you said that there are not people here at the $25 million mark, there actually are. And I've learned that where some people reached out to me and said, Eric, I know you help small businesses, but we've really, you've been helping a lot tremendously with my organization because,
Mhm.
and we're a large business. Because what I've found, John, is that the large companies, and like you said about the inefficiencies, they don't necessarily have training for these people that they're hiring, like to come in and run some of these departments, right? So um, I found that there's a lot of potential out here to make this process better for companies of all sizes, and that's why
Yeah.
I want to continue talking to people like yourself because, again, I mean, I deal with Davis Bacon because I'm in construction,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so which is kind of similar to like
Yep.
SEA,
Yep.
right? But I don't
Exactly.
deal in SEA. So for me, um, having someone like you that has that proficiency is invaluable, right? Because now I've got someone that's people call me and they're looking for someone who has that skill set, that experience that I can go, oh no, give John a call. I mean, that's what he does.